And so we're going to read this morning in Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 1 to 3. And it says here, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race that is marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. And this morning we've been hearing, even in the prayer meeting, about a bit of weariness. And I want us to throw that off today as we think about this. And I love this line, and let us run with perseverance the race that is marked out for us. Do you know today that you are in a race? You are in a race. And I'm in a race. And this race is not a sprint. It's not like we're just going to go for it for 3 weeks and then we're going to wear ourselves out and burn ourselves out that then we can't do anything for months on end. This race is like a marathon. And it starts at the beginning of our lives and it continues until we take our last breath. And the marathon is also a relay race. And each one of us, we get handed a baton to run with. And all the time, spanning through our lives, we should be holding a baton. There shouldn't be a moment of our lives that we are not carrying a baton, that we are running with something ourselves in our lives. And there shouldn't be a moment we're not also thinking about handing the baton on. Who is it that you can hand that baton on to? And you know, the baton can change from season to season. And I think it's interesting even what Kate brought this morning about a change of season for the church. It's all right, we're not going anywhere. But, you know, there can be these changes of seasons. And there should be changes of us handing on batons throughout our lives and receiving new batons as things move on. And we should be carrying these things so that the generations that come after us will be able to carry their batons well. And so this morning we're going to look at 4 ways that we can run our race well. And the first point this morning is know that the race is bigger than you. Know that the race is bigger than you. Do you know the race didn't start with you? This race has been going for centuries and centuries and centuries, and we just get to play our part during our lifetime. We are a part of this long line of people who have handed the baton on to us for right now, for such a time as this, for us to run our race, and at some point then we hand the baton on to someone else. And our worldview is small if we think that our lives revolve around ourselves or around our own families. There are thousands who have gone before us in this relay race. And I love the fact that Hebrews 12 obviously comes right after Hebrews 11. And Hebrews 11 is like the hall of fame of all those who have been mighty men and women of faith. And you can read in there about Abel and Enoch and Noah and Rahab. And then we get to Hebrews 12, and it says, therefore. Therefore. So we look at what it's there for. What is it, those great people of faith, since we are now surrounded by these ones, by this great cloud of witnesses. And you know, this encourages us because we look and if you look at the names of the people in Hebrews 11, they had tough lives. You know, they had serious trials that they walked through. It was not all smooth sailing. It was really rough for them. But if we look at them, it encourages us because we say, you know what? They ran their part of the relay really well. And if they managed to run it really well, then I can run my part of my relay well as well. And so we look at these ones that have gone on to be the great cloud of witnesses. And even here in this church, there are ones over the years who have gone on to become like the cloud of witnesses. And even this past year, we've had 3 go on from here to become part of the cloud of witnesses. We've had Amy and Joan and Joe. And that also brings something to our heart that makes us go, you know what, I want to run this race really well while I'm here. And to make the most of the days that I have while I'm here. And many of these ones that have gone before us, they paid a price so we get to do what we do each day now. And so many things we take for granted. And the other morning I woke up and I was thinking about a woman by the name of Kate who lived in the 1880s in New Zealand. And this woman was an amazing woman of God. And she loved the Lord, and her whole heart was to set up things that would bring incredible change to society around her. And she set up women's institutes, and she set up other Christian societies throughout New Zealand. And this woman, she was deeply moved by something that was going on in society in New Zealand at that time, and that was there was a lot of drunkenness. There was a lot of misuse of alcohol. And so she asked the question, well, what can we do to bring change? How do we bring change so that this doesn't continue? And so this woman, Kate Shepherd, she fought for women to be able to get the vote. You know, and often we hear about Kate Shepherd, and she's on our $10 note, and that's all very exciting, but we don't hear about the fact that actually she was a Christian, and that actually she was moved for a greater cause to bring change when she went after women getting the vote. And I think that's amazing, and I think sometimes we need to think about people who have gone before us in the great cloud of witnesses and the price that they've paid, and let's not take for granted the things we get to do today. You know, it's really important how we live our lives, because that will determine what gets passed on to the next generation. Because it's not in the big things that we do sometimes. We may not fight to get particular people the vote, right? And we may not end up on the $10 note. But there are everyday things that we do that people are watching, and it makes a difference. And it will really challenge and emphasize and change the way that they will live their lives in the future. And I remember when our son Nathan, he was 18, and he was about to head off to move to Christchurch for study. And I remember his last 3 days at home really, really well. We'd been away on holiday together as our last holiday as a family. And then we came back and we had 3 days for him to pack up and put his life into 2 suitcases to move to Christchurch. And one day I was in the laundry and he came in to me and he had this armful of all these posters and he said, Mum, where do you want me to put my posters? And I was like, what do you mean? Like, why have you taken your posters off your wall? And he said, well, Mum, I don't know if I'm coming back. And I figured you might want to do something with my room. So I'm emptying the whole thing out. And I just broke down in tears. And I sobbed all over him as, you know, a great, strong woman that I am. And I'd held it together till then, and then it was all over. I was like, why would you do that? Why would you empty your room? And why would you say you're never coming back? And, you know, the thing is, I have no idea what I thought I was going to do with his room. I mean, I wasn't going to, like, set it up to a shrine. You know, I wasn't going to sit there and remember my son. Like, it wasn't going to be like that, right? That's weird. So I wasn't going to do that. But still, it hit me like he is going. And he might not come back. And that was one thing I remember. The other thing that I remember is I remember the slightly panicked feeling of, oh my goodness, have we taught him everything he needs to know? Does he know everything he needs to know? Does he know how to pay the bills? You know, he's about to go flatting at the other end of the country with people he doesn't know. Like, how is this going to go? Have we done enough? And part of me was like, Nathan, sit down. I know you're trying to pack, but let's talk about, like, paying bills. Do you know about paying bills? Like, all these bills you're going to have to think about. Like, you've got to pay them on time, right? This is really important. Don't get into debt. You know, like, I'm trying to, like, let's do a, like, 3-day cram here, like, right before an exam. And it wasn't going to work. And I couldn't do that. And what struck me was that what he was taking into the next phase of his life was accumulation of 18 years that we'd already inputted into his life. And we couldn't try to cram it in those last 3 days. And we didn't need to, because it had been all the little things that we'd done. It had been Peter teaching him at 3 years old to shake someone's hand and look them in the eye and to introduce himself. You know, it was the cleaning the bathroom every week. It was the cooking dinners throughout the week. It was all these little things. It was talking about God. It was talking about having an authentic relationship. It was talking about the value of church. Because you know what? He wasn't coming to church with us anymore. He gets to choose to go to church. That's his choice. And it was all these things, and it was this moment of realization of, like, it's been all the way that we've lived. That's what we've poured out into him, and now he gets to go and live his life. And in the same way, people, it's the way that we live our lives in our workplaces, and here at church and with our neighbours and with our families that influences how they will go and take things into the next part of their lives. How we run our race, how we run our part of the relay matters to those around us. But some lanes right now in this relay race, they are empty. They're empty because people stopped showing up. And I'm not sure why, but this week it came up on my Facebook page that I was coming back into the river building for the first time in 4 months. Now, I practically live here, right? Between Sundays and during the week, this is our second home. And I hadn't been in here for 4 months because of Auckland's lockdown. And I remember, I came into the auditorium and I was like, thank you, God. Thank you, God. We are back. We get to be here. I was so, so grateful. And I just think, man, let's not lose that gratefulness to get to be in the house of God. Let's not lose it. I don't know when it became normal to come to church once every 2 weeks, or once every 3 weeks, or once every 4 weeks. But it's like the sun is shining and the farmer's market is calling, or sleep is screaming at you, and it just becomes the priority. But you know what? When other things become the priority, the lane gets left empty. And others turn up on a Sunday, and I'm like, it's okay, I really want you to meet so-and-so. Oh, but they're not here today. Their lane is empty. And we need to start showing up and to take our place and to be in our lane that God has given us. Because sometimes things have become too tempting. Sometimes there are batons and they're lying on the ground because they got dropped along the way. They're lying there because someone tripped on their leg of the race. And now there's batons of character, batons of integrity, and batons of morality, and they're lying on the ground and they're scattered and abandoned because something else got in the way and became more tempting. And maybe you're here this morning, you're aware that you've dropped your baton. You're no longer running with your baton. Something else became more important. And you've left your baton on the ground. I want to encourage you today that it's time to pick your baton up. It's time to start running with it again. There is a calling on your life, and it matters if you're carrying your baton or not. There has to be a tenacity and a passion that rises up within the inside of each one of us, that even when we're tired and even when we're weary, we say, you know what, I'm going to get up and I'm going to pray today, because other people depend on that. And it matters whether I read the word, because it matters whether or not I can recall to mind when the attacks are going on what God says about me and what God says about the circumstances. There has to be a passion that rises up and changes the way that we live, because it matters to the people around us. Perhaps you've experienced healing or freedom from something. That is a baton that you can pass on to the other people in your lives. Let's be sure we remember we're part of a big picture in the great relay race we are running. My second point this morning is live differently. When you're in a race, you live differently. You don't feed yourself on a whole lot of trash, because it's going to affect the way that you run in your race. In a relay race, I often think when I'm watching the relay races, like in the Olympics or something, I have to confess I don't partake in them often, right? Actual ones. I do remember running an intermediate in a relay race, and it wasn't good. But anyway, we should have practiced a lot more, especially the handing on of the baton. But anyway, but I reckon when I watch the relay races, I reckon that the first runner gets a lot of attention, right? Because you want to watch how that first runner takes off, because how they start the race is really important. And often the last runner, they get a lot of attention and a lot of applause, because we all want to see who's going to win that race. We want to see how they finish well. But often there's those runners in the middle of the relay. And often the applause isn't quite as loud for the runners in the middle of the relay. And something I learned this week is that the runners in the middle of the relay, they actually often have to run a further distance than the beginning and the end runners do. And I wonder how often we are in the middle of our relay, and there is no applause, and there's no one cheering us on, and there's no one watching how we're going. Parenting's like that. There is no applause. There is no one cheering you on. You're doing well. But it can be really tough when we're running in the middle of our relay. And we've forgotten about the cloud of witnesses who are cheering us on. And we can just feel very, very alone, and we can feel very tired of running. And it's then that we must remember the purpose and the importance of what we're doing. It's about showing up. It's about being committed. It's about doing the things when no one notices. It's about serving out the back. It's about vacuuming the floor or giving of the food or buying the gift vouchers. It's about praying through the night for people in need. They're the parts of the relay that really count, that no one sees. How do we live intentionally? We throw off everything that hinders us and the sin that so easily entangles, Hebrews 12 says. So what is hindering you today? What is hindering you? What is holding you back? Is it thoughts or is it people? There are choices on how you're spending your time. Is that hindering you? Because the Bible says we're to throw those things off that hinder us so that we can run our race. And then it says we're to let go of that sin that so easily entangles us. And I think that's an interesting picture to think about, that sin entangles us. It entangles us round our legs and it stops us from being able to move forward. It holds us back in place. So what sin is entangling you and tripping you up in your race? Netflix series, or there's destructive behavior, or maybe there's people pulling you down, or things pulling you back in your walk from God. Those things, it's time to throw them off. In 1 Corinthians 9, verse 26 and 27, it says, "So I run with purpose in every step. I am not just shadow boxing. I discipline my body like an athlete, training it to do what it should. Otherwise, I fear that after preaching to others, I myself might be disqualified." Man, we don't want to be disqualified. And you know, it grieves us when we hear of other people getting disqualified or Christian leaders getting disqualified. We don't realize the value of and the pain that it would cause to those around us if we got disqualified. We're to run with perseverance, the word says. Why does it say that? It says that because we will feel like quitting. There will be times when you're like, you know what, I'm out. I'm done. I'm finished. Those people have said that too many times and I can't be bothered hearing it anymore, so I don't want to do this anymore. But it says to persevere, to keep going. You know, when there are people relying on you, there is no out. There is no way to quit because you're aware there's like a whole lot depending on you doing what you're doing. And I think that's how it is often, you know, when you've got young kids, you might feel really sick and you don't feel like doing something, but you have to just get up and do it because no one else is going to do it if you don't. Let's not quit. Let's be ones who are persevering. It says here, we fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. You know, when you run a race, you don't take your eyes off the finish line. And we shouldn't take our eyes off Jesus. Because when we look to Jesus, then we're reminded of how we can live and how we can love people and how we can pour out and how we can serve and how we can do these things no matter what. Be intentional about where you're fixing your eyes and what you are filling your vision with. Live your life differently to those around you. My third point this morning is pass the baton on. Pass the baton on. You know, there is only a certain area on the track where you can pass the baton on. You can't just chuck it when you feel like it. You have to wait for this particular zone, which is the relay zone. But some people are dropping their batons well before they get to the relay zone because they're discouraged and it all just feels a bit tough. And so it's easier just to drop the baton before you get to the zone that God has prepared for you to hand your baton on to somebody else. Others are holding on to their baton for far too long. They're really good at getting their baton, but they're not so good at passing it on to the next person. And there's a reason for that. They can't let go because their baton is way too precious for them. Because this baton, it really costs them something. And I get that. And it's hard to let go of things when you have paid a price to be able to receive that baton and carry it really well. But there comes a time where God's like, you know what, it's time to let the baton go. It's not meant to be yours anymore. It's actually meant to move on to somebody else. And some people holding their baton for years past what they were meant to. And so eventually they do end up just dropping it because they didn't pass it on when they were supposed to. And when batons get dropped, then so much gets lost in the process and people get hurt. For some of you, it's time to pass the baton on to others. But you know, there is a way to pass the baton on well. When you hand it on, you don't just throw it backwards and hope that there's going to be someone who will catch it. You may take someone's eye out if you decide to chuck it randomly behind you. There is a way to pass it on. And you know, the way to do it is to look and to go, you know what? Who is it, God, that you want to raise up, that you want me to pass this baton to? Who is it? Who can I pray for? Who can I spend time with? Who can I invest into? Who can I share with? Who can I make this a blessing for them, not a weight that is hard for them to carry? Hebrews 12, verse 12 to 13 says, don't sit around on your hands, no more dragging your feet. Clear the path for long-distance runners so no one will trip and fall, so no one will step in a hole and sprain an ankle. Help each other out and run for it. Clear the paths for those that you're handing the baton on to. Clear the way so that it is easier for them to run. Don't be like, oh, well, I had to pay a really big price. I know how tough it was. You know, people can be like that about like things like buildings, right? Kingdom assets. Oh, well, I know the price we had to pay. We had to fight a fight to get this building. We're going to make it tough before we hand that on to the next lot of people. No. It's like, man, you are so blessed to be a blessing. Hand that thing on and be like, be blessed. I don't want you to have to fight the fights I had to fight to get here. I want you to be able to go further than me. So I'm going to clear the path before you so you're not going to trip. You're not going to put your foot down a hole and break your ankle. You're going to be able to run in a clear way ahead of you. You know, when we've had people involved in things at church, the way that things have succeeded well, not just for that area of church, but also for that person and the thing they go into, is when they transition really well. It's when they don't just leave one day, or they don't just disappear and we don't even know they're gone. But when they come to us and they say, hey, you know what, I'm feeling like maybe my time is up in this area here of ministry, but I really want to hand this on well, so how can we work together to make this happen? And we can pray and we can train up the next people, and there's this beautiful, smooth transition. And it's a great thing. Let's transition well when we hand the baton on. You know, when the baton changes hands in a relay race, you don't have the person come running up behind you for you to give the baton to. You have them start ahead of you, and you run up to them and you hand the baton on to them because you want them to go further than you will ever go. And you know what? You just run and you just hand that thing on. And you know, it has to be a really secure person to be able to hand a baton on. And you have to be really secure to be willing to let go of it. Because you might be really aware that the person who takes the baton, they might drop it. And they might. They might drop it really badly. And maybe even like faceplant as they drop their baton. But you know what? That's okay. Because I bet you've dropped a baton before. And I've dropped batons before. And I'm grateful that there was someone that was still standing behind me going, do you know what? It's all right. Just pick your baton up. Just pick it back up and just keep running. You're going to be okay. Just keep going. You know, when we pass batons on to people, let's keep cheering them on. Let's keep saying, you know what? I'm here. I'm just going to support you, and whatever you need, I'm going to be here for you. Let's not just hand it over and go, well, good luck. Thank you, Jesus. I'm out of here. I've done my time. Let's be like, how am I going to help you? Let me support you in what you're going to do. It takes humility to hand over a baton. It takes a lot of strength and a lot of courage to hand on batons. But it is so, so worth it. And we can do it really well. And if you're not sure who to hand the baton onto, I want you to look around this church. Because we have this church full of amazing people of all ages and stages of life. And they're incredible people who are just hungry for the things of God, who are like, just hand it to me. I'm willing to pick that thing up. They might be older than you, they might be younger than you, but hand the baton on to them. You know, we have amazing young people who are here for the 9:20 prayer meeting, and they're here early for church, and they're here serving out the back and on the cameras and doing awesome things. And I love how hungry they are. Let's not be a generation that holds so tightly to batons that we don't pass them on to the next generation. Know when it's time to pass it on. My fourth point this morning and last point is finish well. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Firstly, let's find the joy, people. Let's find the joy. Find the joy in life. What is the joy that fills you up? What is the joy set before you? And I love this verse because it shows us how Jesus managed to endure the cross, what it was that he set his eyes on in front of him. And it was the joy before him. He didn't look at the hardship and the pain and the trial because he saw the joy. He didn't look at the temporary things, the disappointments, the friends that walked away and left him. He kept his eyes fixed firmly on the eternal because that's where he found his joy. He knew that there was more coming than what was temporary and happening right now. So where are you finding your joy? The joy that gets you through the challenges and gets you through the storms and helps you to look at better and brighter things. Joy is knowing that God is with you and that God is in eternity and that eternity is waiting. And it puts into perspective everything that we do in the day-to-day when we have our eyes fixed on eternity. Paul reflected on his leg of the race at the end of his race. And in 2 Timothy 4 verse 7 he says, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Paul looked back and he considered what has been important for him in his life. And we get to choose how we run our race. We also get to choose how we finish our race, whether it's each leg of the race or it's our final leg of the race. The runner on the homeward stretch knows that it's important not to drop the baton at the last minute. Let's never drop our batons right near the end of our leg of the race. You know, David was one who near the end of his life, he held on to the baton and he passed it on so well to the next generation. See, David had this dream within his heart that he wanted to build a house for the Lord. And he came to God and he said, Lord, I want to build you a house where you can dwell here on earth. But the Lord said to him, no, I don't want you to do that, David. That's not what I've got for you. But your son Solomon, he will be the one that will build the house for me. Now, David had a choice at that moment. David could have chucked the baton and been like, well, stuff that, God. That sucks. That's not what I wanted to have happen. See, I've got this dream that I want to see happen. No, he didn't do that. He said, okay, God. All right, I'm going to do this really well. So God gives him the plans. And God tells us how much gold to weigh out, how much silver to weigh out. And so David takes all of this to his son Solomon and he says, you're going to get to build this house for the Lord. And so Solomon does. He picks those things up and he gets to build those things for the Lord. And in 1 Chronicles 28 verse 20, David says to Solomon, do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord God, my God, is with you. He will not fail you. And I love that because he speaks into the spirit of his son. Sometimes it's a case that we pass things on physically to others. Sometimes it's a case that we give a spiritual inheritance to the people around us in our lives. He speaks into the spirit of his sons and he rallies the people to come behind his son. And his son gets to succeed in this beautiful dream that his father had because David passed the baton on really well to the next generation. C.S. Lewis said, you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. It's never too late. It's never too late to change the ending. You get to choose how your leg of the relay race will finish.